Currently, the catalog is online, but to actually view some of these tapes, you have to actually come down and see them or listen to them or read the transcriptions. Sooner or later, they're all going to be on YouTube. The object of the interview is to record the significant personal histories of interest in aviation highlights. Hopefully, it will take 1.5 to 2 hours. I'll try and ask simple and relevant questions with some follow-up for clarification. We'll start with the mundane info and then move on to more personal stuff and talk about your personal insights and belief. And maybe at the end you can kind of give us your overall view of where we are today in aviation. Once we've completed this, I'll have it transcribed onto our mainframe and we'll make a DVD and I'll mail it to you in the mail. We were doing having these transcribed, but it's extraordinarily expensive to do it.
Yeah.
So with the transcription you go back and correct things, but
yeah.
I don't think it's all that important right now. So to start off, let me just start with your name and date of birth and where were you born?
Okay, my name is Rex Warden. I was born December 15th, 1924 in the state of Iowa.
How about your parents?
My parents were born in Missouri, and it's across the line from where I was born in Iowa. They were born in Grant City, Missouri.
What were their occupations?
And my father was a farmer, and all my ancestors on that side of the family were Midwestern farmers. And my mother, her parents were, her father was a banker. So and other members of her family were teachers.
So what got you interested in aviation?
Well, probably somewhere in the 1930s, and I can't remember the exact year, my dad hired a ride in a biplane. And the two of us sat in the front cockpit of this biplane, the pilot was in the back. It was a typical barnstorming thing in those days where pilots that had those kind of planes came around to country areas and gave rides, and that's how they made a living. So that was my first contact with a flight. Then later on, in my schooling, I became interested in, of course, the Lindbergh thing was part of our schooling in all those days. And I remember having a Lindbergh tablet, of course. And that one thing led to another. And then World War II came along, and I knew that I wanted to get involved in military aviation. And I had seen a movie somewhere in the 30s, the West Point of the Air, with Robert Montgomery and that particular thing, which was interesting. And then interesting note that I then later on, many years later, living in Rancho Santa Fe, in the market, village market one day, I saw Robert Montgomery. I felt like I said, little you know what you caused me to do.
Did you talk to him?
Just briefly, said hello, but I didn't do that. Wallace Berry was the other guy in the movie, and I remember, but it's funny how the little things like that. But then the war, then I knew that I wanted to be involved in Army aviation. So that's why I signed up for the Army Air Corps program as soon as I could. At that time, they wanted pilots to have 2 years of college. And I had graduated from high school in 1942. I went to the University of Wyoming, 42, 43. Then they would take us if we had 1 year, because in the program we signed up for, we went through basic training, then we went to college training to get enough to where they would recognize that your total education requirements were equivalent to 2 years. And then we went on, then you could go on to flight training.
So where was your first pilot training base?
My first pilot training base, well, first I had to go through pre-flight, which was in San Antonio, Texas. And from there I went to, in West Texas, a little town out there where I flew the P39 as a primary trainer.
A little town in Texas called?
I can't remember that popped up right off a minute, but it was a West Texas, small Stamford, Texas. Stamford.
I went to pilot training in Del Rio, Texas. So
did you? Yeah.
God awful place. So, so you flew the PT-19 first?
PT-19.
And
that was the primary trainer. That was made by Fairchild. And it had a fairly wide landing gear, open cockpit, two-seater, low wing. And it was a very pleasant airplane to fly. It had an inverted engine with 4 cylinders, air-cooled. And I thought it was a good airplane, and my instructor, in those days we had primary was civilian instructors. And my instructor was from Chicago. And at that time, I thought I wanted to be a bomber pilot. I thought I wanted to fly B-24s. But with his instruction and what we went through, the program we went through, I seemed to have an adaptation for aerobatics. And he said, no, he said, I think you should be a fighter pilot. So that stuck with me then, so I went on to basic training. You want to move on to basic? Mm-hmm. Basic training was in Sherman, Texas, with a BT-13 made by Vultee, and that had about a 450 horsepower radial engine. And it was a larger plane, and it also had a fairly wide landing gear for landing, but there was the first time we met an Army instructor. We had an Army officer, a second lieutenant was my first flight instructor for the Army Air Corps. And we jokingly called the BT-13 because the Vultee vibrator, and the joke was it was 10,000 rivets flying in close formation.
So after the BT-13,
then I went on to advanced training. See, the PT-19 was primary, the BT-13 was basic, then the advanced training was 86, the Texan.
Well, they used that for a really long time.
Yeah, they sure did, in both the Army and the Navy.
Right. Called it something different, but.
Right.
So when you flew, then after you flew the AT-6, now did you graduate and get your wings?
Right, I got my wings in early September 1944. And I had planned to go right on from advanced flying graduation into replacement training at RTU. Mm-hmm. But the system had kind of backed up. Apparently they had enough pilots a little ahead of us, so we didn't go right on to plan. So then I was picked in a small group to go back to flight instructor school at Randolph Field, Texas, which was, of course, the old primary principal base of the Army Air Corps. Historically, all the bells and whistles there for that part of it. So I went through that 6 weeks to be qualified to become an instructor. And then I was sent out to Big Spring, Texas to be a flight instructor at Goodfellow Air Force Base.
What was your class? What class were you?
44H.
44H.
September 8th, 1944.
I was in 66G.
Yeah.
So then what did you instruct in then?
The T6.
Okay.
And basic T6.
So, but now somewhere along the line,
advanced. No, it's basic. No, I did instruct. I was taught to an instructor in a T6, and I went to fly as a T6 instructor. Yes.
So when the war ended, where were you?
Then I was in. Well, when I was out in Goodfellow Field, I wasn't there very long. I was there maybe 6 weeks, and they came along with a program one day, and they said, "We need some volunteers to go overseas right away." Well, I was frustrated having been sidetracked into being an instructor, so actually I was the one that held up my hand right away. Well, there were more volunteers than were openings, so we had to draw cards. And I drew the King of Diamonds, and so I was on the list. And so we were told to go to Greensboro, North Carolina immediately, and we did that and go back there, typical overseas stuff, carbine and rifle range, 45 caliber pistol, qualification, lots of shots and all that stuff, and then shipped down to Miami, Florida for the APO. And we got down there, and a nice hotel we put up there, but we didn't get any information where you were going or when you were going. So we hung around until one day they said, "Okay, pack your bag. We're going to leave the hotel tonight. So we did that. Got out to the airport and had our bags packed. But then here we had to walk on to a C-47, and it was kind of mostly full of cargo. And you know, where the heck are we going with something like this with just a bucket seats for us to sit? And so they told us, well, after takeoff, the captain of the airplane, he will come back and open your orders 30 minutes after takeoff. Then you'll know where you're going. So we got in there, and it's a Goonie bird, C-47.
Right.
And so we grind along up there, and he comes back and he says, well, guys, he says, I'm going to drop you off in Panama. The Panama, hell, there's no war there, you know. but as we found out later, you know, the defending the Panama Canal was pretty important in those days, because principally for the Navy, because everything had to come through from the eastern seaboard through the canal to get to the Pacific. Supplies, aircraft carriers, and a whole 6 yards. So, and also the Japanese had some threat early on that they could possibly get a submarine in an area and blow up one of the locks and choke off the canal, and that would be a major logistic problem for the United States.
So this would have been about March, April of 45?
Yeah, well, no, it was January of 45.
Okay.
When I was in Panama, yeah. I was initially there. So December was when I was going through all this, well, late December, going through all this training at Greensboro and at the APO in Miami, right? That was always, you know, kind of in those days, kind of condensed, and you went through that with
But now you're going. But then you're going to. Then were you going to fly the AT-6 down there then? Or?
No, P39. They go into a. So we were going to go to fighter squadrons there, and as I say, I had been an AT-6 pilot in advanced. AT-6 pilot as an instructor, right, and been instructing, but right at when we just first graduated, for the first 10 days after graduation, we flew a P40, just as an indoctrination to fighter planes, like maybe 10 or 15 hours, no, very little. But we did have that. So, going to Panama, because it was not an operational, wartime operation, then they had the time to train you into the airplanes of their equipment. And the squadrons in Panama were equipped in this is early 1945, they were equipped with a P40 and a P39. The squadron I was assigned to was a P39 squadron. And that was interesting. So obviously, I didn't have to do a lot of extra training. We checked out in the P39 right away and started flying that. And
but wasn't that a whole lot different than what you'd flown before?
Oh yeah, it was. See, the P39 was a single-engine fighter plane. The engine was behind the cockpit. It had a 37-millimeter cannon firing out of the nose, and the drive shaft from the engine to the propeller went between your legs in the cockpit. But it was a relatively easy airplane to fly. It had a fair amount of horsepower, and it had a cruising speed of about 250 miles an hour. The reason that it was not used more because it didn't have a supercharger, so it was altitude limited. About 12 to 15,000 feet it started running out of juice. But it was highly maneuverable below that, and because of the engine being behind you, cockpit out in front real well, good visibility, low wing, and you could really fly low. As I recall, lazy tropical rivers, we'd be down buzzing there, and you could see the wake from the prop horse, you know, when the guy you're flying off of. But no, it was a fun airplane to fly. Now, as you can tell, I have about a 10 size shoe, and it was doors like a car. And on the right door, you had the starter, which there was little, kind of like a car. you push down on the bottom of it for energize, then you push the top of it to engage, to start the engine. And so the engine will start, and then you shut the door.
Oh, jeez.
And but it was good. And I think I got about 150 hours in that plane in about 4 months. We flew a lot there. And a lot of us training, but also a lot of us just various patrols around the canal. And not just around, but areas away from the canal a little bit too.
And a lot of dogfighting, of course.
What's that?
A lot of dogfighting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Training. Yeah, right.
Training, right.
And see, every time a Navy group would come through, they would launch their planes off the carrier away from the canal, and they would land on our base. They'd stay a couple of nights with us, but there would be one big dogfight with all the Navy planes when they were coming in, and we would go out to meet them.
Somehow I knew that was going to happen.
Yeah, right.
Well, I recently read Chuck Yeager's book, and he really seemed to like the P39 a lot.
Yeah,
he flew it a lot, So.
Well, it was kind of a different thing to fly. Now, the airplane had limited use in the United States Air Force because of the altitude limitation, and they had other planes come along, easy to take their place. The Russians really liked it, and so the Russians bought a lot of them on the Lend-Lease program. Mm-hmm. And what the Russians liked was a cannon. They liked that 37 millimeter cannon for because they did a lot of close support against the Germans there. And so I don't remember exactly how many the Russians bought, but it was over 1,000, I think.
So where were you when the war ended?
Well, let me finish my Panama thing.
Go ahead.
P39, January, February, March, and April was primarily the P39. Then we switched over rapidly to the P38L. And the P38L was the last model of the P38. And we just transitioned right there in the squadron. We didn't go any place for training. We just, one day the P38s just showed up and the P39s left, and we didn't have any simulators those days. And but we went to ground school, and we had handbooks and all that stuff. But when it became time to fly, the squadron commander and one or two other more senior officers had flown the P-38 before. So one of them had been out in the Pacific. So they rigged up a harness for him to hook on to the gondola by the cockpit and kind of ride on the wing out there when you taxied out to the end of the runway, and ran up the engines to check them, temperatures, pressure, and all that kind of stuff. You go through for check the mags and all that stuff. And he'd be then out there looking in to making sure everything was okay. And when it looked okay, then he'd unhook, slide off the wing, and walk over to the side, the runway, and wave you on. And then you'd take off. Now, that sounds a little weird, but now remember the P-38 had counter-rotating propellers. No torque. And it was the last of the Lockheed fighters for World War II. And it had really a lot of the good things built into it. It had aileron boost. The engines were turbocharged all the time. The turbochargers were on all the time. It had, for the first airplane, it had dive flaps, because early on the P-38 had a compressibility problem on the horizontal tail, and it caused it to buffet in dives and made even a nose tuck. So you could get yourself diving with full power. You get yourself in a position where the nose would tuck and you couldn't pull it out. And I had one classmate, he got in that situation, and he hit the ground straight down about 700 miles an hour.
So you think actually they actually did go supersonic then?
Well, close to it, that's right. Yeah. Unplanned.
Well, of course. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a question I always am interested in is, well, can you really go supersonic?
Whether or not they actually broke the sound barrier, could it be low? I don't know. But I'm sure they got to 0.96, 0.97. But nevertheless, they did come out, so we did have the dive brakes And when you got in that situation, you could open the dive. The dive brakes were beyond, under the wing, beyond each wing nacelle, each engine nacelle. So, and that would enough surface would come down there to make the nose pop up a little bit to where then the elevator would be effective and you could pull out. Of course, pull off the power too.
Yeah. Open the canopy, put your hands out.
Yeah.
Drop the gear.
But the P38, in my opinion, was really a Cadillac to fly. It was probably the peak of the engineering for World War II. Now, P51, excellent too. P47 for their particular roles of mission. But I think the P38, from a pilot's point of view, from a comfort and ease of flying, was really a Cadillac. Yeah.
I read Bob Hoover's book, and Hoover talked about, because he flew everything. You know, he was there when they put them together in any test flight. And he talked about another friend of his who did the same thing, and they did combat between the P38 and the P40. Right. And he thought the P40 was better than the P38.
Well, that would be for lower altitude. Yeah. Now, higher altitude, I wouldn't buy that for higher altitude.
No, but then again, it was Hoover after all.
That's right. But let's talk about another good pilot like Hoover was Tony LeVere. Tony LeVere was a Lockheed pilot, and he could really fly that thing. And after the war, Tony bought a P-38 and it painted it red like your shirt.
Oh, yeah?
And he went around and put on air shows. And I remember seeing him at the Cleveland air races after the war. And man, he could put on really shows with that airplane too.
So what sort of altitude that could it get up to?
The P-38 could get up to 35,000 feet without a lot of problem. And it could fly that there at 35,000. It would go a little higher, but you start getting mushy.
So, but did you have pressure breathing at that altitude then?
Yeah, we had oxygen, full oxygen system, just like all fighters had. Just same as the P-51, same as the P-47. Yeah.
But did it start to pressurize at 25 or 30,000 feet? So when you take your breath, it forced more air in.
No,
That's what they did.
No, I think it was whatever we had. Cabin pressurization was just state of the art of that day.
Oh, so you did have some cabin pressurization.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
but it wasn't like we had later on with the jets. No.
Yeah. So when did you start flying so you started flying the P-38 prior to the war ending then?
Yeah. We started flying that in May. And so I flew in May, June, July, and August. And I think I had 250 hours in that thing in about 4 months. So we flew a lot. So I had 150 hours of P-39, 250 hours of P-38 when I came back. 400 fighter hours when the war was over,
And no one shot at you?
No. But really good experience. But now, I was really upset that I was sent there, of course, as you can imagine. Second lieutenant on this train. But it saved my bacon in Korea because I really learned about gunnery, dive bombing, strafing, low altitude flying, high altitude flying, dogfighting. So when Korea came along some years later, not too many years later, 5 years, because I was 45 in Panama in 1950, I was one of the first pilots in Korea. The experience I had there and the training I got with that was you couldn't repeat it.
Well, but you were basically allowed to stay in when the war.
Well, I decided to stay in. I know.
It was optional.
On the war, well, when you're just a single, I was a first lieutenant. Then the war ended, I was a first lieutenant, and I wanted to keep on flying. I didn't. I could have gone back to college like a lot of guys did on the GI Bill, but I really had that, that P-39, P-38 experience, and that was, it's hard to turn that faucet off just at one time.
Right.
And so I decided to stay in. So then, because I had been through the flight instructor school after I graduated, right away they sent me back to Randolph Field to be a flight instructor. So I had a job, you see what I mean?
Right.
That they wanted. early on during the war, General Arnold had promised some of the guys that were beat bombardiers and navigators that they wanted to be pilots, but he said, no, we got to have bombardiers and navigators. After the war, if you stay in, we'll send you to pilot training. So that's what I did first. So I came back in 1946 from Panama, and with that background as a flight instructor, they sent me right to Randolph, and the students were these officers, lieutenants, maybe one or two captains, but they had been crewmen on the bombers, and they were taking the Air Force up on their promise and trying to go back to convert to be pilots.
How'd they do?
Some did fine, and some didn't. Some didn't make it. It was clear that the initial screening process back in '43 and '44 was effective. They really weren't. They thought they wanted to be pilots, but when they got up there in the front seat, upside down and spinning and things like that, they didn't feel so good about it.
That is odd, isn't it?
Well, you know, there's nothing like a three-turn spin, you know, to kind of tell whether a guy really wants to do that or not. You know, because you pull an 86, you know, you pull it straight up, throttle back, kick the rudder full in, and snap over the top, and spin 3 times, then they pull out, you know. And some of them, because an instructor is sat in the back seat, and I could watch, always watched, and if their neck got really red, I knew that they were not comfortable. And that's when you wash a lot of those people out. But you know, you've flown, you know what I mean.
Yeah, I didn't like spins at all, but I got in trouble with my instructor because they wanted these positive corrections.
Yeah.
Nose down. And I would just fly it out. It just seemed so easy to me.
Right.
But
when I say when you're an instructor, and if you had 3 students, you had to do three-turn spins at a certain period of the program with each one. So I would come down at the end of the morning, I'd have had 9 of those things.
Oh, God. So is there a...
Now, there's one more thing I should tell you about that time.
Okay.
That'd be important, what you're saying. So in 1946, and he had been stayed in, and I had a job as a instructor. But they asked a lot of us that stayed in to apply for regular commissions. And so we went through examinations and interviews, who shot John. And I was one of them, so I was integrated into the regular Army as a regular officer.
So, did you happen to know Roger Ward?
Who?
Roger Ward.
Yeah.
He was an instructor down in Texas. You know, the race driver, Roger Ward.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, he was doing the same thing you were.
Yeah.
At that time, he was in Texas somewhere.
Yeah.
And his commander caught him racing cars. He won the race on a Saturday night, and it said it's either the racing or the airplanes. And he said, "I'll take the racing," and he quit.
Yeah, sure. So that's why. So I got into the regular Army. So that's what made me. I stayed in their point on. When we converted the Air Force, I was a regular Air Force officer.
So were you still in Texas at that time then?
Yes, I'm still at Randolph when I was integrated in the regular Army.
So that was the regular Air Force started in 1947.
47, that's right. But I was regular Army in 1946. And so the beginning of 1947 was still the Army. I can't remember the exact conversion date, but I was sent to the Air Tactical School in Tyndall Field in January. That was a 4-month course. And that's where we learned more to be squadron operations, kind of squadron management kind of stuff, supply and maintenance, operations. But we flew, and they had us divided. The fighter pilots were in one group, the bomber pilots were in another group. The fighter pilots flew the P51H, that's where I got to fly that. And the bomber pilots flew the A26, or B26, how you want to call them. But that's what they flew. That's a twin engine made by Douglas.
How do you compare the P51 to the P38 and the P39?
Well, the P51, in my opinion, was really a good airplane to fly, but it's a different kind of a machine. The P51 I flew, the H model, had a Merlin engine, had takeoff 3,000 RPM and 72 inches of manifold pressure.
Oh my God.
And as you went down the runway, that right wing was lifting off. The stick was clear over here and coming down your leg like that to take off. And your right rudder in it, because with all that power, it was just lifting off. Of course, it got off in a hurry, and man, it took off. No, it was really, it was like flying a racing plane.
Yeah.
And everybody enjoyed it. Any fighter pilot said he didn't like that would be lying to you. Yeah.
So, but you couldn't have been in that very long before you switched over to the P80 then.
That's right. No, we'll get to that.
Okay.
So the Air Tactical School was in January through April, I guess, 1947, flying the P51H. Then in August of 1947, I went to the Jet Fighter School at Williamsfield, Arizona.
Wow.
And learned to fly the jets there. Now, and the reason I got there and was able to do that is because they wouldn't let you into the jet school unless you'd had 25 hours of fighter time in the last, I don't know, 2 months, 2 or 3 months. And so having flown the P51 in Tyndall Field, I met all those requirements of being a qualified fighter pilot just recently. So my application to go to the jet school was accepted. And so I went there in August.
So this is 47 now?
47.
Wow.
And so I went.
Well, what was your first impression looking at that P80?
Well, the first impression was, compared to the P51, it was kind of sick. The initial P80 was underpowered. And it had about, 5,000 pounds of thrust. And on a hot day at Williamsfield, Arizona,
Oh boy.
takeoff was a long ride.
Yeah, yeah.
Compared to that 51, wanted to zoom off in a hurry. But
What kind of speeds could you actually go in a P80?
well, the P80, it would cruise at 350, 400 miles an hour.
And the
of course,
P51, what would it cruise at?
about 275, 300 max.
So how would the P80 have compared with the ME-262?
Well, it would probably be, I would say probably the 262 was better.
Yeah.
Let's see, the P80 was our first jet. Lockheed did a good job designing it. The airframe was beautiful, but the engine was, our engine technology was not up for the game yet.
Yeah.
It was later, and it was coming up pretty fast.
Yeah,
Now, I'm talking about the original P80
Yeah.
with the paint job, the gray paint job.
Right.
Now, so then once I got through that school, I went back to Randolph. You couldn't keep you there. You had to go to an operational fighter group. And so I was sent then to the first fighter group, which was the Air Force's first operational fighter group. 71st Squadron, 27th Squadron, 94th Squadron at March Field. And I was sent to 71st Squadron. And now there we had the P80B, which had a bigger engine and better to fly. And then, of course, later when I was in Korea, I flew the P80C.
So now how long are you at March then?
A little over a year.
So have you been back to March at all?
Oh, yeah.
Is it pretty much the same as it was? Or?
Oh, yeah, it's amazing. The hangars still look the same, and the one I was in, it looks the same. I don't look the same, but it looks.
No, yeah, I was at March for 16 years.
Were you?
Yeah, I flew the C-130s in the reserves from 71 to 87, basically.
Oh, but
yeah, it didn't change that much.
No.
And I'm sure the officers' club hasn't changed a bit.
Yeah, I know.
But was it 13,000 feet long when the runway at that time?
It was a pretty long runway. It was, and of course, but the P80B, we didn't have we didn't have any trouble getting up. It was a long run, but it wasn't a problem getting up. And then we did a lot of good things there. Of course, we did all the gunnery down over the Salton Sea area. And
no kidding, Salton Sea.
Yeah, right, down in that area. That's not over the Salton Sea, but in that mountain area.
Yeah, it's
right.
what they call it, the Chocolate Mountains, I think.
Yeah. So, and we did that, and we did some dive bombing, that kind of training down in that area. But I enjoyed my time at Marshfield very much.
Now that's what, you were there at the same time as Olds was, right?
Yes. Yeah, he was, Robin Olds, in fact, he had been in his, I think, the same squadron, 71st, but at the time I was there, he was up at group headquarters. Mm-hmm. And as I told you on the phone, his wife was an ex-movie star.
Oh, I forgot.
Yeah. And so when she would walk through the officers' club, all the lieutenants' eyes would be.
I have a feeling he was at the bar a lot too.
Yeah, but you know, Robin Olds, in my opinion, for what I know about him, I never did fly with him person to person, but I think he really was a good fighter pilot. He was a good fighter pilot in World War II in Europe. He did a good job for us at Marshfield, and of course he did a good job in Vietnam, and retired as a colonel.
I was in F4 school down at Davis Mountain, and Robin Olds came through.
Yeah, right.
And he was only there for like a week, but he went on 4 or 5 flights.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine flew in one of the flights in the back. We were backseaters, so we were just getting into this stuff. And Olds was in the flight, and so was Chappie James.
Right.
And I guess the discussion prior to the pre-flight briefing, all the usual stuff you go through for half an hour, and then finally Chappie James said, well, enough of that BS.
Yeah.
What's the bet?
Yeah.
And so they placed their bets on what they were going to do for dive bomb and all, and I guess Olds won all the money.
Oh, yeah.
Just took everybody.
I think Robin Olds, let's see, there's another guy too, but he was probably as close to being a total fighter pilot that I knew about, right, in my time.
Yeah. Well, so now I remember I read about Olds' book. I mean, if you haven't read it, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, right.
But he talked about doing air shows with the P80.
Yes, and of course, you know, Pappage, Herbst. Perhaps Herbst was killed right up here at Del Mar.
Yeah.
And Olds was on his wing.
Yeah.
And fortunately, he saw the handwriting on the wall and went out the back side.
Yeah.
And Pappy completed the loop, and he hadn't read the altimeter right, went in the ground.
Yeah.
But you know, I think Olds was I don't think he's probably very frustrated because he never became a general, because his father was a general.
I think they made him a general when he retired.
Well, no, maybe they did, but he was a colonel in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And that's his last operational thing.
Well, he went to the Air Force Academy for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And then did you ever see the pictures of the missing man formation they flew for?
No, that's right. Yeah.
What they did is they had a missing man formation. TV camera can't see this, but they did the missing man formation when they came over like this.
Right.
Lead pulled up.
Yeah, right.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I understand.
So how did you get to Japan?
Well, okay, that's a good question, and it's a good answer for a solid answer. Marshfield, because it was the first operational jet fighter group, they wanted to use that for cadre for the group in Japan, the 49th group, which was being changed over from the P51s to the P80. And also the group in Germany, I think it was a 36th fighter group in Germany, was also being changed over to jets. Jets in Europe, jets in Japan. And the only jet at that time was the P80. The F84 was coming along, but not that far along yet. So they took people from Marshfield, sent us to Japan. Some of us they sent to Germany.
So now when did you go to Japan?
I went to Japan in January 1949.
What was it like there?
Well,
you went to Misawa? Or
Misawa.
Okay, and then Itazuki finally? Or?
Well, Itazuki after the war started.
Right.
But no, I first went to Misawa was my initial base. That's where the 49th Fighter Group was based, 7th, 8th, and 9th Squadrons. And the 49th Group if you remember Dick Bong, Richard Bong, who was a top ace in World War II. Yeah, I think he was in a 9th Squadron. I can't remember one of those squadrons. Anyway, the 49th Group had a real history of World War II in the Pacific. Mm-hmm. And so they were the first group to be equipped with the jets. And so several of us were sent there to be they sprinkled us out through the 3 squadrons and I was sent to the 7th Squadron, and I was a flight commander. So then I had a duty to train and develop a flight. Then other officers came in for the other flights and so forth. So over a period of time, I'd say maybe 6 to 7 months, then the 49th became more jet qualified and less P51.
They had P82s there too, didn't they?
Not with the 49. The P82s were the photo reconnaissance stuff, but that was not with the 49th Group. No.
Yeah, I was actually looking online this morning at the history of the 49th.
Yeah, no.
And then they had showed pictures on the flight line of the P80s and the P82s.
On the flight line.
Yeah.
It wasn't the 49th Group.
Yeah, well, it just showed the picture. I think I don't remember the group name.
Yeah.
But I was also surprised when I was well, anyway. So so you get to Japan and you get everybody ready. Now, was there any hint at all that the Koreans were going to be coming down from the north?
No, it was a surprise to most of us.
It was in June, wasn't it?
That's right, June the 25th. They marched across the line. My unit.
This has got to be a staggering event to everybody.
Yeah. But
when did you first know about it?
Well, my group, my squadrons, we had been on maneuvers, training for maneuvers, down at Atame, Japan. And the 8th and the 9th were back in Misawa. Then we finished our maneuvers and we were getting ready to come home. And then the North Koreans invaded South Korea. And then President Truman said, we will protect the South Koreans and resist that. And then 5th Air Force Headquarters, General Partridge, he made a decision. He said, okay, since the 7th Squadron is just finishing up, let's send them back to the base, and we'll take the 8th and 9th and take them to Itazuki, and we'll get them in operations right away. And the 7th Squadron will go back to Misawa. And since the 49th Group was, we were not up to full strength from a TO and E point of view. So he said, you guys get back up there because we're going to send over some guys and fly another maybe P51s or F84s or something, but we got to get some more P80 pilots. Or we want to send jet pilots over, but maybe we'll send some over to it, and you get them trained in a hurry in your techniques and what you do in the 49th Group. So that was our initial mission. So in my squadron, we did that for about 30 days before we then were sent down to Itazuki to join the other 2 squadrons with combat operations.
Okay, so this would be like in July, August, you're sent down to Itazuki?
Yes.
And so what were the missions?
Well, all the missions for that part of the war, there was very little air order battle on the enemy side. What there was taken care of in about a first week or two. They were prop planes. They didn't have any MiGs in those days. So the primary missions that we got into was the 8th Army, protecting the 8th Army, ground support and interdiction. That was what we were primarily involved in. Now, if anybody saw an airplane, obviously they would try to do something about that, but basically there were none to see. Now, I think probably any enemy planes were gone in the first 10 days or 2 weeks. And it's because most of us, we never saw a hostile airplane in 130 missions, all the way to the Yalu. But see, they didn't.
Could you fly that? Could you get that far north?
Oh yeah, and this is an interesting story too. Now this is a 49th story. We had 2 guys, one of them a good friend of mine, Bob Beckman, and the other friend of mine also, Rabbit Johnson. They were the engineering officers. Rabbit was engineering officer of the 8th Squadron. Bob Ekman was the engineering officer of the 9th Squadron. They came up with the idea of, are you familiar with the 165-gallon drop tanks on a P80?
Right.
Well, what they did, they took a section and moved another section and made those tanks 365 gallons.
Oh, wow.
Off on each wingtip. And so we did that then. So that gave us a radius of action. Yeah, we could go all the way to Yalu River with that. Yeah, from Itazuki.
So what was your armament?
The P80 had 6 50 caliber machine guns, and then we had wing racks that we could carry 4 5-inch high velocity rockets, or we could carry 2 500-pound bombs.
And so now, how did you know what targets to hit?
Well, we went up. First off, if you go out on close support, we could also carry a napalm, a jug of napalm on our edge wing. If your mission was close support, then you knew where that target was and what you were trying to do to help that Army unit. If sometimes they were pinned down, and your job was to try to eradicate the enemy in front of them with his men and equipment. Or if they wanted you to be an interdiction, and you went beyond the front lines and you killed, shot, erupted, whatever you could find, rolling stock, anything moving on the roads, railroads, you were wiping it out. And that was effective. And in fact, the general that was in the Pusan perimeter, the 8th Army, Pusan perimeter, the whole 8th Army got squeezed down to a pretty small perimeter called the Pusan perimeter, as the North Korean forces kind of overwhelmed them on the first part of the war. Say from July, August, September, October, September, the perimeter got pretty small. And then we brought more reinforcements in for the Army, but really the air power, and the generals admit this, I think we with the fighter bombers and with the B-29s, B-26s, really eradicated the Korean Army on that perimeter and permitted the American Army, 8th Army, to move out and counter offensives. And then we was right in front of them all the time. And we were able to, I mentioned napalm was a very effective weapon, particularly when we caught them on the road. You can imagine a bunch of Army trucks going down the road, how they kind of go close together. And we could come in there with a jug of napalm under each wing and hit them across the, they'd be going up the road, we come in this way and drop that napalm. And you could wipe out 4, 5, 6 trucks at one time. And you kill all the soldiers because napalm burns all the oxygen out of the air. And they die of asphyxiation. If they don't die of burns. So it was a very effective way of hurting them as they were trying to get out of the way and retreat. So
they came down, and then when the technology of the U.S. Air Force and Navy probably...
Yeah, that's Dispatch 477. That's right.
Yeah. Just basically forced them back up again.
Yes, that's right.
And did they retreat all the way up to the Yellow before the Chinese came into it?
Yes. Then, then in October, since things were going pretty good for us, we moved from Itazuki to Taegu, a forward Air Force base. I'll make myself clear. That's where you live in tents and you have peristeel planking for runways.
Right.
Life's pretty damn basic. You're like being a GI, but you're close to the lines.
Right.
And so we didn't. Sometimes we'd fly during the day. We wouldn't even have drop tanks because we were so close to the lines. 50, 60 miles would be targets.
So now the temperature's starting to drop.
Yes. got very cold in the wintertime there. But we were able to, the main people that suffered from the cold were the Marines up at Chozon Reservoir.
Right.
They got hit pretty hard on that. I flew 2 or 3 missions up there. And they were really a bad way.
And so I don't really know the history of the war very well. Yeah. So, but they were at the reservoir up there, and then that's when the Chinese attacked and kind of cut them off from everybody, wasn't that?
That's right. But the Chinese attacked first on the eastern side. Kind of visualized Korea, kind of cut a line in Korea down the middle. The Chinese side was that's the western side, and the eastern side is on the side of Sea of Japan, right? Mm-hmm. Basically, Task Force 77 was kind of given a duty to do the work on the eastern side, which they did very well. And the Air Force took care, and the Australians, Air Force, British, took care of the western side. And that's where primarily the Chinese primarily came in there, Sinuiju, crossing the Yalu River there. And that's where I encountered them, and that was primarily in December or January. I'm not exactly sure about that, Ron, but they came across, and we couldn't stop them. They were walking across with their rifles over their head, and they had a little package on top of their head too. I guess they had some rice in there, some ammunition, and these guys were walking across those rivers. That's cold water, and of course, there you're talking about, thinking back now about it. If you go to the command and staff school or the war academies, they talk about the different principles of war, right? Well, they were relying upon the principle of mass. They really believed that they could win with the principle of mass because they had the mass. They had more soldiers than we did, and they could get more. And so we could go down there and across those rivers, we could kill 1,000 of them, but they go back to the rice paddies and get 5,000 more, right? And they did that. And I don't like to talk about this, but it's true. We would strafe those rivers, and the river water would be as red as your shirt, and we still couldn't stop those guys. It wasn't we were not under any threat, no enemy air. It was just like ground gunnery. And these guys walking across there, we're just hosing them with 650 caliber machine guns down there and killing them.
How many rounds did you have?
I can't remember now. We had quite a few.
Yeah.
I should know that number, but I don't. But
it's just interesting to me that there was no build-up to the whole thing. I mean, it almost sounded like the squadron was put in place, almost foreseeing what was going to happen. But apparently there was actually reunification talks at that time, weren't there?
Yeah.
As I recall, I mean, I was just reading about this stuff this morning. There was actually talks of reunification of the two countries, but yeah, the communists versus the capitalists,
Well, I think that we were involved with South Korea and the North Koreans, and then let me clarify this. When it got started between the two, North Korea and South Korea, then the North Koreans lost the war. Probably about in November, they recognized they had, because we pushed them all the way back to Yalu, and they no longer had enough capability, enough forces to respond. But the real strategic decision was made in Beijing and in Moscow. Neither China nor the Russians wanted the Americans to have a military force on their respective borders. China, now remember the Russians have that peninsula over on the right side. They didn't want us to have actual military forces on their borders. So that's what drove them into getting, the Chinese particularly said, all right, we'll push them back to the 38th parallel, and then we'll have a basis of North Korea and then South Korea.
Well, and was it George Kenning? Kenning, right?
Yeah, Kenning.
Yeah, with the
Air Force.
Oh no, what was it called? The containment doctrine.
Yeah,
You know, the telegraph that he wrote
yeah,
in
right.
1948, or just for containment. And actually, you can see Southeast Asia, Vietnam was the same sort
That's
of
right,
thing.
right.
It wasn't any different, you know.
Right.
Didn't seem to me, at least.
Yeah, so have I made myself clear there about how we kind of got involved in
Yeah.
where the Chinese were coming in?
But then when you went back to the States, and then you quickly got into the Navy.
Yeah, well, that's right. But see, I didn't come back to the States until about early February 1951.
You got cold enough for you, decided to
So
leave.
I was flying missions in December and January in Korea, and that's like we were talking about here, the Chinese, and also we. This was also something I don't like to repeat too much because it irritates me of how our government does weak things sometimes. They wanted us to try to stop the Chinese intervention, and the bridges across the Yalu River were key to the Chinese moving supplies and men across. And in the 49th Fighter Group, one day we were given a mission, and what they did, they took 4 pilots out of 3 squadrons. Those had a lot of experience and had some good records in dive bombing and things like that. And they sent us up to Manpojin, which is really up at the point on the Yalu River, the top part of Korea. And they wanted us to cut the bridge across there. And but as we were briefed, and we did this from Daegu, and we were carried up 2 500-pound bombs and our big tanks. So the tanks got us the range to get there, so that gave us 4 bombs and to try to knock the bridge down, one span. But at the final briefing, he said, now, we want you only to put steel in the water on the Korean side. No, don't touch China. So we got up there, and that's what we did. But as we're going down the dive bombing run, all the flak was coming up like mad. The guns were on the China side. They weren't even camouflaged. And they were just firing away at us, you know. And fortunately, we did hit the bridge. A couple of bombs, we put steel in the water, and we did it on the on the Korean side. And then as we're getting out of there, of course, you know, Air Force, we have good ways. When we left the target, we left in 4 different directions. And then we would rendezvous and climb out and head home. And Kanghae at that time was the capital of North Korea. It was pretty far up there too. And so we're right, by that time we were up about 35,000 feet in loose formation. We're just flying south. And all of a sudden here comes 4 or 5 bursts of flak, you know. They didn't hit us, but I always figured they just wanted to let us know that they knew we were there. And they probably also said, you know,
I can't believe they hit the bridge. I mean,
yeah,
they had
that's right.
such
It's like, you bad guys put some upset our bridge too.
well, they had such a hard time hitting bridges in Vietnam. I mean,
Yeah.
but they lost like 100 planes in
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
bridge over a matter of
I know.
15 years. And
We did knock this one down, that one span of it.
yeah.
Now, I'm sure in a week or two they had to put it back together.
Yeah. But they did it. Did they ever, bust the dams and all that sort of business?
Okay, let me come to that. I think that was a key thing. Yes, I think you just put your finger on why the war ended there. The negotiations were going on to get a treaty where the communists and our NATO forces could agree upon what we're going to do to stop the actual hostilities. And there was a disagreement on the final part of the treaty, and it kept going back and forth. And finally, I forget which one of the generals, I think it was Wedemeyer, said, we've got to do something to hurt them, because right now, as long as we're just fighting on the ground, things going back and forth, the Air Force doing their thing, and they figure they can wait us out. And so they said, there's some dams over on this west side up north, And there's some power plants. And let's go bomb those and knock them out, because some of those power plants also put electricity into China. And some of the dams put water down that will flood some of the rice paddies into North Korea.
Let me stop the tape right here, because I gotta switch this thing here. Okay, I gotta figure out how to do it. Push that thing off. Kind of the wrap up of his part of the war in Korea. Okay, continue.
Yeah, the Air Force part.
Air Force.
Okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
So now, that essentially was probably the highlights of my experience with the Air Force. And then, so I finished my tour with the Air Force and was sent home. Just a human interest part, but my wife was in northern Japan because we were part of the occupation army before the war started. And she was pregnant and due to have a baby any time. And since at that time the mission requirement was 100 missions, but it was kind of a flight commander's war because most of the flights were led by 4 airplanes or maybe 8 airplanes, and captains did most of leading the flights. And I was one of those flight commanders. So they asked us to volunteer if we could to stay longer. So they wanted to volunteer to 125. So I did. I got to 125. They still had some problems, so I went on to 130. And when I got through the 130, then the doctor told my wife either she had to go home right away or have the baby in Japan. And my group commander, who I'd known for a while, he got this information, so he said, "Rex, you get out of here tonight." So they shipped me out that night. And, well, first I was in a mess hall having lunch. I'd been out on a mission, come back. And on the mess hall, to make note, it said, "Captain Warden, report to operations right away." And I thought, well, it's been sent out again. So I go down to operations. That's when it said, "Colonel Murphy says for you to pack your bag and be out of here tonight." So I did. So that got me home in February of 1951.
Let me ask you a question about the P80. Did you wear a G suit?
Oh yes, all the time.
Okay. Did they have G suits in the P51s and all those other airplanes in World War II?
I think we did in P51s. I think so.
The P38s apparently not.
I don't recall that. We might have, but I don't recall that. No. But I do. To me, the P8, the G suit came in with the jets.
Yeah. How many Gs could you pull in a P80?
Oh, you could pull 4 or 5 easy. Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, you didn't have enough engine to do much more than that.
No, but you know, it's a matter of just doing aerobatics. You could pull quite a few Gs. 4 was easy.
Yeah. So what were you doing? 30 and 45-degree dive and strafe and napalm runs.
Right. Yeah. But the Gs were never a problem too much then, because once you get into the dive, you want to stabilize that and until you get to drop the bombs, because you want to give the bombs a chance to get off of the wing before you move the airplane. Otherwise, you'll disrupt the trajectory of the bomb. Right. So then you do that. Once you pull away like that, 3 or 4 Gs might be more of a normal thing. Yeah, that's about right. And then now strafing, you kind of want to have a low angle for strafing, and because you can cover more area with the bullets that you're strafing, and it gives you more time when you.
What airspeed did you use?
So strafing?
Yeah.
Well, you can be up to 350 miles an hour strafing. Yeah.
Wow.
Of course, in fact, you wanted to, because they could be shooting back.
Yeah, right.
But strafing, you're low and like that would be normal.
But the airplane was, as far as stability for strafing.
Oh yeah, good.
Was it as good as or better than the P51 and all the other airplanes?
I didn't fly the P51 enough in that environment to know. The P38 was great, but again, the P38 was counter-rotating props, no torque.
Right.
And a jet, no torque.
Right, of course, right. Yeah. So anyway, now you're back to the States. Where at?
Back at Kirtland Air Force Base in Air Defense Command, flying the F86A.
Now this was like a new command though, wasn't it?
It was then, yeah. That was just starting because they're concerned about the Russian bombers coming across, then Canada. Remember the DEW line, names like that? Mm-hmm. They're coming across and bombing our northern parts of our country. So they're developing the Air Defense Command to put bases along the cross, Washington State, Montana, Dakotas, north and New York, and up there, then into Nova Scotia, places like that.
Yeah, I heard you say that what that would be, there were bases every 200 miles. I never really thought about that. There basically were bases all around the.
Well, they wanted to. We're talking about NORAD,
right.
North American Air Defense Command,
right?
And they had optimally they wanted bases across the northern part of the country, and they hopefully could have enough fighter interceptor squadrons, which had the equipment to be scrambled and move up, could climb fast to intercept with guns or rockets, whatever they would have, to shoot down the enemy aircraft.
You just wonder why in the world they thought that the Russians were going to come and invade the United States.
I often agree about that too, but that's what they did. At that time, the intelligence was that the Russians had that capability, and you remember that was Khrushchev's time, and before.
Well, that was 60. That was 60s.
Before that,
yeah.
They had Stalin was still around.
Yeah,
that's right, and it was still there. And of course, Korea was still just winding down, right?
Yeah.
Well, Korea was still going on. Yeah, Korea was still going on till 53.
Yeah.
I'm talking about 51. Oh, yeah.
So you go back to Kirtland and flying F86s.
Right.
An air defense type role.
Right. And the reason I was there, we were Kirtland because we had the atomic.
Right, Sandia and all that.
Sandia.
Yeah.
And then the test ground up north of it.
Yeah.
By
Los Alamos.
Yeah, Los Alamos.
Right.
And that's why we were there.
Yeah.
And of course, it's kind of a jerk type mission, but we flew F86s with hot guns on alert, and some poor United Airlines guy get off course a little bit up there. They start heading for Los Alamos. Of course, they scramble us off, And I always had a horror of ever finding get up there and some clown sitting there half asleep on autopilot on a DC-4, and we got to shoot them down, It's crazy world sometimes, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I remember I was in high school, probably in 54, somewhere in that time, and my next door neighbor came over with a bunch of John Birch Society brochures, and it was, God, the commies are going to take over the world, beware. And everybody was scared to death.
Yeah, I know, that's true.
And even in officer training school, I was in 65, I guess it was. Yeah, 65. And I clearly remember a big map on the wall with all the pink countries and the blue countries, and we were being surrounded. Oh, scary. I think we caused such paranoia. Probably our paranoia caused paranoia on the Russians and the Chinese as well.
Sure did. Yeah.
So now, okay, so F86 in 1951 or so, and then you just pretty much fly, sit alert, and live in Santa Fe,
Albuquerque. Yeah, that's right. And that was for a year. And then at a point, and I guess it was at Marchfield, we had a RAF exchange officer into the 71st Squadron. So I had become aware of exchange programs. And somewhere along the line when I was in the 93rd Squadron, they came along and said, if anyone is interested in being involved in the exchange program, we would like to know whether you would or not. And I thought, well, that would be an interesting sign. And I was a regular officer, and I could see that would be a broadening of experience. Oh, yeah. And next thing I know, bingo, I get orders to report to ComNav Air Pac in San Diego, California, 1st of March, 1952, for further assignments to VF51 fighter squadron.
Wow. Wow.
So here, my wife and I, at that time we have a year-old child, So here we go, and I think I had a Buick two-door car. Well, yeah, it was a back seat. Anyway, so we put a mattress, baby mattress back there for the child. Of course, you just couldn't find a motel every night in those days.
Right.
And we head west and reported into North Island over here. And it turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to me. And the F51 was still out on the Essex right at that moment. They were coming in. So I had to kill some time with another squadron over in North Island, flying the F9f, and then the F51 came in. And so we went through the changeover from their old guys and the new guys, and went to Miramar and started our training cycle to get ready to go back to Korea. And so we did all that, El Centro, gunnery train again, all the training here, and a lot of FCLP, Field Carrier Landing Practice at Miramar. They have a place on the runway kind of blocked off. And then being an Air Force guy, single cockpit. Came the day we were going to get on the carrier, we were going to get on the Valley Forge and deploy to the Far East in about October, I guess it was, 1952.
How was the airplane? How was the F9f compared to the F86?
It was a little bit behind the F86. It was a good airplane, but remember, a carrier airplane has to have more weight. You know, that big hook and all that stuff.
Gear and all that stuff.
The gear has to be stronger. No, it has to be more rugged. So it weighs a little more if you put it on a thrust to weight ratio, it comes out second best because you got to have more weight. Same amount of thrust, you're going to have less performance, right? Mm-hmm. That's basically what it was.
But it was a very dangerous airplane, didn't they? Kill a lot of pilots with those things.
I think you're talking about the F9f. I think they had it was underpowered. The F9f was a little bit like the F80 was initially. Mm-hmm. Didn't have enough thrust. The 5, I thought
so the 5, that was the swept wing version.
Yeah, no, that's the 6.
That's the 6.
Yeah, that's the one they had trouble with.
Okay.
Yeah, no, the F5 was a straight wing and had a better engine in it. I thought it was a pretty good airplane for its mission. No, but the Navy wants to copy a lot of the Air Force stuff when they were all enamored by the F86s doing SJS, and so they wanted to sweep the wings, and that was not a good decision.
Yeah, but that airplane, was it FJ3? I think it was the FJ3.
No, F9, F6.
No. When they took an Air Force airplane and made a carrier airplane out of it. I think it's called the FJ3, the Fury. I think it was called the Fury.
I don't recall that.
One of our board members flew him. He loved it. He thought it was a great airplane.
Yeah. What do you think the name was?
I think it was called the Fury. It was
the Fury. Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah.
FJ3.
Oh, no, the Fury.
Yeah.
That came a little later, yeah.
Yeah, they extended the nose gear.
Yeah, you're right.
Strengthened up a little bit.
Right, yeah.
He thought it was the best fighter ever flew.
Yeah, that was kind of a copy, a Navy copy of that 86.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, you're right now.
So what was it like an Air Force guy being on a carrier?
I'll get to that. Well,
it just sounds horrible to me.
Well, we went through all the training and of the field carrier landing stuff, but it was just single seater, and I had to do it by myself the first time. But remember, I had a lot of fighter experience.
Right.
I probably had more fighter time than 3 or 4 of the guys in the Navy squadron added together.
Yeah.
And but I'd never flown a carrier. So my squadron commander, Commander George Duncan, he's long passed, but I will never forget him. He did me a big favor. And so we were getting ready. So he said, okay, Rex, he said, you and I are going to take off early in the morning, and we're going to go down and land on the Valley Forge. Fine. So we bounced off of Miramar about 7:30 in the morning out here, went down off the Coronados Islands, and the Valley she was offshore down there. So it was kind of, typical San Diego gray morning. So we let down through this hole in the cloud, and the ocean's kind of gray. The ship was gray, and we come down there, and I'm on his wing. We get up down to 200 feet, go by the ship. He peels off. I count another 30 seconds, and I peel off. And we get around and come on the downwind leg. Now, I'd been briefed very well. So when you're on the downwind leg, you keep the stack on the carrier on the horizon. That way you won't fly on the water, okay? Because you keep the stack of the carrier on the horizon. That's your downwind leg. And you get to where you turn in the base leg. Base leg, we'd say, in the Air Force. You come around into the final approach. And then you pick up the LSO. Yeah, so we still had, because this was straight deck. It wasn't a cannon deck.
Mm-hmm.
But straight deck, and then the landing signal officer picks you up on the paddles. And then you, from that point on, then you do what he says. Now, you're flying the airplane, you know, you got the throttle, you got the stick, and you're slowing it down. You got the wheels down, flaps down, but he comes along, and if you're fine, he holds out like that. That's what we call a Roger signal. If you're high, he goes up like that. Then you got to come down. If your paddle's like that, means you're low. Put the power to it and come up, right? If it does that, that's the worst thing we get. That's a come on. That means you're low and slow.
Oh, jeez.
So you have to shoot the juice to it, raise up a little bit. Otherwise, you could be what they call, you're going to hit the spud locker, which is the fantail on the carrier.
Right.
Don't do that. So, but if you get that Roger pass, then because we had to, we couldn't go around, we had to take a cut. And there are wires on the carrier deck for your hook to catch. You have the hook down, of course. And then there are barriers ahead of you. A nylon barrier and 2 steel wires, cables ahead of that. And so you get there, everything's okay. He gives you the cut signal. You chop the throttle. You kind of make the airplane squat, come down. Hopefully the hook catches the wire, and you come to one hell of a quick stop. And everything, I got on the first time really good. The only thing I wasn't prepared for, and the guys had told me, so when you're out there before you turn up, basically make sure you got those shoulder straps tight, because you're going to stop quick. And so I came around, but I didn't do quite enough. So when the hook caught the wire, man, I went slamming forward. And in those days, the Navy, we didn't have a helmet, single piece. We had a cloth World War II kind of helmet. Yeah, not a helmet, but yeah, a helmet. But then they had a shell, right? Put a shell on over the top of it. Well, the damn shell came right down over my eyes. I wasn't sure whether I was on the ship, in the water, or where the hell that was. And so I got that up, and here's a crewman over there, you know, so I give him the signal, pull up that hook, you know. So I did that, and then taxi forward. Of course, there wasn't anybody else on the carrier, just George Duncan and I that morning. So good landing, got out of the airplane, went down to the ready room. He was down there waiting for me. Had a cup of coffee. In those days, we smoked, had a cigarette, a cup of coffee. And the carrier was, they weren't too busy that morning, so he worked out a deal with the captain where they cycled me through the deck, just me. So I'd launch, go around, land again, launch again. So I had about 5 landings in a hurry. It was really the best thing that ever happened. You know, built my confidence level up. Mm-hmm. Now, I had thought a lot about the landing, prepared for that. I had never given much thought about the catapult shot. So after I landed all right, I go back up, I get up, and my airplane's on the catapult, where it's supposed to be, and I get in, of course, get strapped in, and I start the engines, go through the drill, checking out the power, go to catapult officers right over here on your right, go to full power, and they have a little steel rod that comes up, and you wrap your fingers around that. So when you get hit, you don't pull the throttle back, right? So I wrapped around that, did exactly what I was told. Engines all look good. Look at the catapult officer, gave him a salute, tuck your elbow back in here, grab the stick this way, and kerbang! I mean, you get hit in the ass with a frying pan, and that you're go from 0 to 100 knots, 100 feet.
Man.
And so I think I was so stunned that I must have flown all the way out to the destroyer screen forever, pulled up the wheels. But then later on, I could see my peripheral vision when the bow of the ship went under, I'd be pulling up the gear. So it's a matter of training.
Yeah.
But that was my introduction to carrier operations. From that point on, I was just as qualified and comfortable as anybody else.
So how many missions did you fly?
I flew 20 combat missions, and I got 43 carrier landings.
And so with the combat missions were pretty much the same thing you were doing before.
I saw some of the same bomb holes I'd put in Wonsan when I was with the Air Force.
So let's okay. So now I come back to the States, and you're in F86s back in Perrin, right?
No, I'm back to Albuquerque first.
Okay.
And then I went to F86Ds at Perrin,
right,
which was the first radar.
Okay. Well, we got 40 minutes left on the tape here, so I've got.
Okay.
So you got into the working for Convair, and how did that work? I mean, because by this time you had 11 years or so, 10 years in the Air Force. That was kind of a big sacrifice to give up.
Right. Well, that probably was not a good decision, but it was for family reasons. I'll make this quick. When I went on the carrier, since I'd been with the Air Force in Korea and survived 130 missions there, and I came back, and my wife and young woman, 1-year-old child and 1.5-year-old child, down there on the quay wall, here I am up on the top deck, and we said goodbye, we're getting pushed off, going out again to Korea. And I thought to myself, now, I know where I'm going, and I might not be lucky the next time. And who in the hell is going to take care of those people? My people didn't have a lot of money, neither did her people. And, $10,000 GI insurance isn't going to last you forever. So I thought, Uncle Sam, you've been good to me, I've had a good time, but I'm going to do this one more time, and if I get through, I'm going to say sayonara. That's really went through my mind. And that might not have been a good thing to do, but for me, it was the right thing to do.
So you did two tours of the Navy then?
No, I did one tour of the Air Force, one of the Navy.
Okay, right. So then you came back, and then you went to Kirtland, and then down to Perrin.
Then I went to Perrin, then I came back, and I decided I had some offers to go to work for Hughes, and then also, because I had this experience, in the F86D, I had all this fighter time, jet time, plus now I knew something about the radar, fire control. So they were interested in that. And Convair, of course.
Well, how did they find out about it, Convair?
Well, when I applied at Convair here.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, the pilot, the chief pilot at Convair at the time, because they were moving into 102, 106, he had been sent to Perrin. You see, so he graduated that training.
Oh, I see.
So he had my name, so he called Colonel Murphy, who was running the thing, had been my group commander in Korea. So Colonel Murphy said, "You talking about Rex Warden? Hell, he's done out of the Air Force." Anyway, but that's how so then Bill Martin, who was the chief production pilot here, so then they gave me an offer to come to work for him.
So when did you start?
About the 1st of March of 1954.
So they were, about a third of the way through the production run of the F102?
No, they hadn't started yet.
Oh, really?
They wanted me to develop that. They wanted me to develop the production flight test for the F102 and F106.
A production flight test, what does that mean?
Well, that means you build the airplanes, they come off the factory, and we put them here at field operations here, got them ready safe to fly to Palmdale. Palmdale was the base where we were going to install all the radar, all the fire control systems. And then we would test the airplanes both for mechanical capabilities and electronic capabilities before we gave them to the Air Force. See, the Air Force won't buy them until the company pilots have checked them out.
So the airplanes are produced here. They produced 1,000 of them here.
Yeah, 1,340 here.
Well, that's including the 106.
That's right.
So, but that's a heck of a lot of airplanes flying out of here. I never thought about that. 1,000 airplanes over a period of 5-6 years.
Yeah. Well, the production stopped in '61. Yeah.
And how many did they make a day?
We delivered 1 month. We delivered 55 in 1 month. You see.
No kidding.
But
well, you got to know the way up to Palmdale pretty well.
See, I was starting off. I was just the only pilot. So I hired all the pilots that came in. We had a pretty good sized flight department. Maybe.
How many pilots would you have?
I think we built up to about 20.
Why so many?
Because we were flying so many planes out every day out of here.
And then did you have to test
and then
them?
flying them out of Palmdale too.
Oh, wow. So what was the average number of hours they had on them before they were released to the Air Force?
Oh, probably 12 to 15.
Did they have G suits?
What's that?
Did they F102s have G suits?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. In fact, we even had partial pressure suits.
Yeah, because when I was in Germany, I had a friend that was in, I think it was called the P39 Interceptor Squadron.
Yeah.
And as I recall, he said he didn't wear a G suit, but because all they were doing was just straight and level.
Yeah. No,
Fox 1,
no,
Fox 2.
Yeah, right. No, wait, no,
They didn't have. I don't think they had a G meter in them.
Yeah, well, no, it did. The ones we made delivered all did. They had a G suit system. Yes.
Yeah.
All fighter planes of that vintage did.
Well, we used to, when we first got to Germany with the F4, we would bounce the F102s. Yeah. And I mean, we'd had big fights with them, and, you know, we'd eat them alive with the F4.
Oh, yeah.
And but wait, then this one guy, two guys actually, Bill McDaniel and Bob Patterson, I think his name, Bill got mad and he started studying our -1 or was it F3?
Yeah.
3-1, their combat manual. And then he and his buddy went down to Torrejon and flew for 2 weeks against each other, one-on-one, and they came back and they cleaned our clock with those airplanes. Because it could turn like crazy.
Oh, yeah, wait to see it.
You could stay up there in the air and you would do zoom climbs and, you know, you'd come up like this and all of a sudden the F4 would go like that. Well, where's that put you? Right back of them, you know?
Well, you see, the Delta wing had a lower wing loading than you did.
Right.
And your F4.
He wouldn't come down low and fight, though.
No. But of course because he couldn't turn with you probably down there.
Oh, we could pull HGs.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right. There you are.
Yeah.
But you see, this wing is not designed for air-to-air combat. This is designed for high altitude.
Why don't you just pick it up? Just take it off the stand there.
Pick it up in the rockets under there, you know. Yeah. See, this has a lot of wing area, really, and a lot of. But it's designed for climbing fast. Designed for when you're level up there with the radar in the nose to see the targets. You can move to where the target is. And then, of course, the rockets are here in the belly.
Well, they had four
Hughes rockets there. And then also, this is a 102. Now, the 106 also had one nuclear tip rocked in there, too, if you want to use that.
Yeah.
Then you have to. But the basic thing, this thing was not designed for machine guns. It didn't even have a gun on it. It was designed for launching rockets, and the rockets would go out and intercept the airplane, right? The radar here in the nose would tell it where it would, when you're in the cockpit, you're flying off of a scope, and you fly the airplane till you get on the right interception path and get in close in, and then you get a signal there that it's time to fire the rockets. And you squeeze the trigger, like you whatever, and the doors open, and the rockets launch. And of course the rockets, they have their own their own rocket power, and that accelerates them at pretty high speed to intercept the target. And then they have high explosive warheads, and then they can, they don't have to have a direct hit to to knock you down.
Well, they had that expanding ring.
Right.
As you got close, it expanded 24 feet or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
So here, let me take it back. Because I read in the reading about the F102, they actually used them in Vietnam.
Yeah.
I was surprised about that.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
And one got shot down.
Yeah.
And they shot one down.
Yeah. I can understand that.
And they said that, but they shot down a MiG too. So
Yeah.
that kind of evened it up.
But it was not designed to be a air-to-air fighter, no.
You would think though, with that big wing.
Yeah, but the 106 could probably have done a better job.
Well,
See,
yeah.
because the 106 had much more power, more maneuverability. Can we talk about the 106 now?
Let's just talk about the 102. How many hours did you finally end up within 102?
On 102? Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Probably.
I would guess I probably had 100, 150. Probably.
Oh, really?
Because, well, see, I did most all the initial stuff. Because I started out as the only pilot, the chief pilot, and then I hired all these other guys and brought them in. And so as we had more airplanes going along, and so I was probably flying every day. Something.
So you were more in a supervisory capacity then?
Well, once I got more people, yeah.
Okay, look, before we talk about the 106, which I'm really interested in,
Yeah.
the Sea Dart, the Sea
Yes.
Dagger, whatever that thing's called.
Yeah.
The F2,
No, it's a Sea Dart.
what's it called? The F2f?
I know, Richburg was a friend of mine. He got killed in that thing.
Right over the bay.
Yeah, right.
What did he?
Well, he was making a low pass down about where the Coast Guard facility is now, and he got into what we call a JC maneuver.
Yeah, well-induced oscillation,
Yeah.
PIO. Yeah.
Right.
Were you there? Did you see it happen? Or?
No, I was there on the field, but I didn't see it happen. I was there right after that. I know, but we had a bailed F86D to us, to Convair did. And since I had been through the F86D school, I was the only one they had on payroll that could fly the damn thing. And the F86D was the only airplane that Convair had that had a chance of staying up with Rich when he was doing some of his testing on the Sea Dart. So I would fly chase for him, right? So I did several missions chasing him around when he was doing his engineering test flying.
So what was it? Was it really at high speed, doing a high-speed pass down over the bay for an air show or something like that?
Demonstration. Yeah, I felt real bad about it. I don't think it should have happened.
Because they shouldn't have been trying to fly it that fast, so low.
That low, yeah.
But it did go supersonic, didn't it?
It could, it helped to, yeah.
Yeah, I've read that.
Oh,
I
yeah,
thought,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
Long
you could,
got
oh,
there.
yeah.
Well, was it exactly the same one as this one out here? Because I know they made 5, didn't they?
Something like that.
And I think 2 never flew.
Yeah, that's right.
And
Because they canceled the program when he was killed.
Oh, really? So that was the end of the program.
Yeah, right.
Well, do you suppose him being killed because of or was it just because there really wasn't much of a need for the airplane anyway?
I think that had a lot to do with it. I think, you see, probably about that time, other airplanes were coming along for the Navy that fit more into everything over there, sea-based airplanes were kind of going out, right?
Right.
You know, even the bigger airplanes, the reconnaissance planes that were, started off with a PBY, right? And the R3Y, remember all those big airplanes? 4 engines.
P5B or whatever.
Yeah, right,
Gigantic.
PBY, yeah.
Gigantic.
And all that stuff, the Navy was...
Well, how did they, I don't even see how those floats in that airplane would keep it afloat. They're so small.
Well, they did. And of course, they're moving. You know, he wasn't just sitting there, usually he would be taxied.
Well, did they take it off start it off on land and then taxi into the water?
Yeah. Right.
From the seaplane ramp over there?
Right. Just like the PBY did. You know, the PBY had wheels, right, too.
Well, they made it both ways, actually.
Yeah.
So he took it. So it was like an air show of some sort that was going on.
Yeah, it was a demonstration for the Navy. Yeah.
Mm.
It wasn't an air show for the citizens. It was some kind of a thing for the Navy evaluation.
And the one out here, did it ever fly, or do you know?
I don't know, but it looked like the one he was killed in, but I don't know that. And of course, the ones I chased looked like that one, yeah.
So you were mostly involved with the 102 program at that time.
Yeah.
But then that was just because you could fly the F86.
Right, F86D.
Now tell me about the Hustler.
Well, the Hustler's the Fort Worth division.
Oh, it was.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
had nothing to do with Convair San Diego was transport airplanes and F102 and F106.
So did they have all those hangars down there then?
Well, in the factory, Plant 1 was where they made all the airliners. Plant 2, all the F102s and 106s were all made in Plant 2. See, Plant 2 is owned by the Air Force.
So, oh really, still?
It still is.
Oh wow.
See, Plant 1 was owned by Convair.
So after they make the airplane, how long would it take to make an airplane anyway?
Well, it depends on what it was.
102 or 106?
Yeah, I'm guessing that once it was approved, you see, when you manufacture airplanes, you know, the equipment and the facilities in the factory are the lead time. That's the big drivers, right? You know, you've got to get all the machines and all the production techniques and methods also, and a way for the supplies to come in, the people trained to do the production line. That's really the long pole in the tent. And once you have all the that done, then you start cutting aluminum and, you know, riveting together and all that stuff. That is more, that goes faster.
Wow.
So you see, probably when the first go-ahead on the 102 might have been in 1951 or 52, but we weren't putting airplanes out really until 1953, 54.
So was the did they ever make the? Now the 102 started actually with pretty much a straight fuselage, and then they changed to the area
model, area Coke bottle. That's right. And when the straight fuselage was a dog, it wouldn't go supersonic. And then they went to an engineer by the name of Richard Whitcomb, who was back at NASA, NACA lab back in Hampton, Virginia. He was a genius that conceived the area rule to reduce drag, and it really worked.
So what was your first supersonic flight?
My first supersonic was in the 102, and I can't remember when we first started off. We had to have the nose down a little bit to go supersonic, but then we got the area rule, and we could do it straight level, 102. But you could go maybe 1.1, 1.15, nothing real. Well, maybe 1.2, but 106 was the first time you really got to go supersonic.
Mostly because of the motor.
Yeah.
How come the 102? How come the 106 has a cut-off tail on the top of the 102?
That's all part of the same thing that Whitcomb did. Whitcomb was part of that too. I wanted to pick up the 106, and I'll show you that.
Whoops. I actually broke the wing off this morning.
Yeah.
That stupid stand fell off in the wing. Oh,
The
wow, it's really a Coke
106, there are three major, well, four, I guess, major things to reduce the speed of the 106.
Increase the speed.
One was the, notice the ducts are farther back. And the area rule is applied to the fuselage, right? See, the ducts are much further back?
Right.
And the area rule is applied. And then they also changed the duct inlets. They're much thinner, and they also had holes in there where they could vent some of the pressure. So there was a definite design to reduce the drag on the inlet duct and also to get more air in to the J75 engine. The J75 needed more air than the J57. And so this met that requirement, and this duct here reduced drag, the leading edge reduced drag. You see how it's in there? And then,
yeah, the F4 had the same sort of thing, all the little holes in the...
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
That's all part of reducing the drag. And this was all part of cut the tail off too. That was that reduced drag too. And And everything was tailored back here a little bit better. See, the speed brakes are smoother. The whole tail end was designed. The whole platform was to get the airflow more controlled across the airplane.
Now the wings on an F102 and a 106 are really curved in odd places.
Now this one, on the 106, the camber was also changed. And that also reduced drag. The tips were a little bit different too. But, and when we had a fuel tank right along here too. And so that in order to reduce, absorb the heat, because see, when you're on a Mach 2, it'd get pretty hot there on the leading edge. So the fuel tank was in there, and it cooled it off, but it made the engine more efficient because the fuel was hotter when it got to the engine.
Huh.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny because the F4 had leading edge slats, and so it didn't do that. But,
yeah.
and I never thought about Mach 2 creating heat, but I guess it would, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, it sure does.
Now I have a friend that flew the SR-71 for a long time, and man, those leading edges get like 600 degrees.
Really hot.
Yeah, really hot.
Yeah. No, this one got pretty hot too, but you know, we didn't stay at Mach 2 as long as it was something like those kind of planes.
No.
Now, when I flew this one at Mach 2, somewhere in 1958 or 59, we went out to, our base of operations was Palmdale. We just made the airplanes here, we checked them out in field operations here, flew them to Palmdale for all the rest of the check, and radar was all installed there.
So what kind of checks did you do when you got to Palmdale?
What's that?
What kind of checks did you do in Palmdale?
Well, primary was a fire control system. See, we actually installed the MA1, MG10, MA1 fire control system in Palmdale. When we took them off out here, they just had just empty nose with just weights up there to bounce out. No, there was no fire control in it. All we made in San Diego was the airplane and installed the engine and the rest of the parts of it. But we got Palmdale was primarily for installing the fire control system and then checking it out. Now, and we had B-57 target airplanes, you know, twin engine bomber planes.
Yeah, I know.
And they were used as
Canberra, I think.
Yeah, that's right, Canberra. And they were used as our target planes. That's another reason we had to have more pilots. Had to have pilots fly those damn things.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. So I got a pretty good sized flight department when I finished up there. Okay, now so this airplane then had a takeoff with full afterburner, about 22,400 pounds of thrust. A weight maybe around 32,000. So you get a hell of a low ratio of power.
Right.
And I would take off from Palmdale with this airplane and get on a climb schedule of about 0.9 Mach, maybe 5,000 feet. And I'd be climbing at the rate of about 30,000 feet a minute. And it'd be going up pretty much just like that. And I'd break the sound barrier at 26,000 feet.
Wow.
And then I could look back down like that, and there's the airport right back down here. Well, yeah, this something is going up almost, not vertical, but it felt like it, you know.
Sure, yeah.
Because you're climbing fast, and
the canopy rails are going down.
yeah, right. Yeah. And then,
the T-38 did stuff like that too.
Yeah,
it was just unbelievable
Yeah.
performance.
Then we got out to when we wanted to make a Mach 2 run, we went out to the Colorado River, and that's where we had a program path you could run over the Mojave Desert, because you're going to lay down a pretty steady boom when you do that. And we got there, and it'd be about 0.9, about a straight level, up at 35,000 feet. And then you put it in full afterburner, full 100% power and afterburner. And an afterburner would give you about 50% more thrust than regular engine power. So, and then within about 2.5 to 3 minutes, and that was a critical time, how long it took to get to Mach 2. Then you would be at Mach 2, stabilize, and first thing you'd be about 750 knots on the airspeed indicator. 750 knots at 35,000 feet is Mach 2. Steady as a rock. No problem flying it. Just, and boy, except those of that mountain range over there close to Los Angeles is coming at you fairly quick. And then you had to get off the power and brake around, and we would sweep up over the top into a high chandelle, and sometimes you just barely touch 60,000, but always 55, 58,000.
Yeah.
Beautiful airplane to fly,
Mm-hmm.
and it really had performance, and now, of course, it had some problems along the way. Had ancient problems. The J-75 had some problems. The airplane, of course, had aerodynamic problems and fixes. All these fixes we talked about had to go through. So by the time they got around to get this thing all ready, and they had 275 of them plus the Bs, and then the F4s were coming along, and I mean other planes were coming along that they didn't have to spend money for these. The mission was backing off too. So
Well, I think they kind of gave up the idea of air interceptors too.
that's right.
It just
Well, exactly because of the Air Force was running out of money at that time too, and they were having a lot of airplanes coming along, and then of course, probably even the F-16s were in a early on picture, but what was it? The F4 though was a big one, right?
yeah, they made 5,000 F4s.
Yeah, that's right. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
So they took a lot of the money because they had to have them. Yeah.
Yeah, the F4 cost, what was it, $1.6 million. I read the F102 cost $1.2 million.
And this one was $4 million flyaway.
And the F22 is $168 million.
And the F-35 is 40 million. Going to be, well, what is it, 40 million just for the one flight test? Right?
Oh, God.
It's terrible.
But I read the paper, somebody was telling me that in Hawaii, the Hawaii Guard has F-22s.
Yeah.
Why?
I don't know.
What for?
And now they're grounded.
I just can't imagine.
Can you imagine they're grounded because of the oxygen system?
Yeah, well, I guess what they did before, the old lock systems just didn't work well enough.
I just can't believe the Air Force can't fix an oxygen system. We've been flying airplanes with oxygen for,
Well, if you know anybody, I have the perfect solution.
Yeah.
Oxygen hose comes up.
Yeah.
Little cage, oxygen hose here. You put a canary there so the pilot can see it. If the guy's like this,
If the canary falls off, we'll split us. Right?
pull the canopy back a little bit. Get some air.
Oh, shucks.
Oh, that thing's getting awful heavy, I'm sure.
That's a good model.
Yeah, it is. Actually, downstairs there's a picture of Fleet holding this model.
Yeah.
And I broke it this morning.
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll be happy about that. So after the flight, after the testing, then it's turned over to the Air Force, and then you just on to the next one.
That's right.
So, but now when the program wrapped up, was that in '64? Was it
62.
'62? So then, did you stay with Condor after
Oh
that?
yeah, I would say because I had been I was fortunate, having been. I was a major in the Air Force when I went to work for Condor. When I retired from the Air Force, not retired, I resigned, and then I put the production flight test program together for them. So, 1959, late '59, early '60, the Rock down here was the headquarters of Convair at that time. Convair was its own corporation then, and the Rock. So a fellow named Tom Lanphier, he was a vice president, and he'd been a fighter pilot in World War II in the 49th Group, and had a big guy with a photo where they shot down Yamamoto and all. Anyway.
So you knew Lanphier?
Yeah.
Did you really? Oh boy.
So
oh man, I'm gonna.
Yeah, so,
okay, I have a lot of questions about that.
So he sort of took a liking to me because we had him up to Palmdale to talk to our. We had a pretty good sized company up there, and for our management programs and things like that. And so then Tom, he gave me a way to get out of the cockpit into the junior executive route, which helped me do that. started out, had me up at Colorado Springs, representing a company up there with ADC and NORAD, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the Air Force still let me fly at Palm, so I could come back down to Palmdale and fly the F106 and can go back to my relationships with the Air Force, which made it unusual, rigid, right? And then when that job finished, then they brought me back down here as a junior executive. Then Convair at that time was bought by General Dynamics. Their headquarters was in New York City. A fellow named Frank Pace was the chairman of that. And I had got to meet Pace up when I was in Colorado, too. So he took me back to New York. And of course, here I am out here and living in, La Jolla and Palmdale and Lakewood, because smaller towns. And if I go back there, my office in New York's looking right down on the square down there where the ice skate and all that, downtown New York. But I wasn't being paid that kind of money. And I was being paid the kind of money you could live here in Southern California. So I could see myself living out in New Jersey or somewhere, commuting back and forth. And I said, I don't want to do this. So they didn't fire me. They gave me the opportunity to go somewhere. So I went to the Pomona division, or missile division of General Dynamics. And I moved my family to Claremont, college town up there.
I know, yeah.
You know, your Riverside. Yeah. So that was a blessing for my family, and that the two girls, they could walk to school safe and all that stuff. So that's why I did that.
So when did you finally retire?
And then, of course, I was with the Pomona Division of General Dynamics until 1973.
I went to Cal Poly, by the way.
Yeah, well, I know
where it is.
Yeah. Well, I went to Cal Poly. Remember, I took a computer program course that we still use punch cards.
Yeah, in fact, I was probably in the same class. I remember that class. With all those punch cards, and we went out to Norton to see the
right.
big computer out there.
Yeah.
Tell me about Lamphere.
Okay, well.
Now, I'm sure you had a few drinks with Lamphere. He probably told you the real story, what really happened.
Well, yeah, I've had a few drinks, and Tom, I never did really push him on that, because there was what was the other guy's name that they?
Rex Barber. Oh, Rex Barber.
Yeah, Rex Barber, yeah. Which one of them really shot down Yamamoto, right?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Tom's dad had been I'd only been a general. He's a colonel, I think, in the early Army Air Corps.
He was pretty high ranking.
He was.
Yeah.
He knew all the big generals. So Tom had Tom Jr., who we're talking about. He had a lot of pull with the horsepower in the Air Force, and I don't exactly know what all about that, because I never did really get into detailed discussion with him. He was just kind of a mentor to me, and he was good to me. He took me out of the cockpit, gave me another way up in the industry. And then after I left the Pomona Division of General Dynamics, I was hired by Aerojet, and I eventually
You worked for Aerojet?
Yeah. Then I wound
when,
up.
really? When?
Then I
What
went for them in '73, and I retired in '88.
My dad worked for Aerojet.
Did he? Yeah.
He worked at, he was in the commercial division of, he left, I think he was as a consultant around that time. I think about the 70s when he left Aerojet.
Yeah.
He was a big high,
Yeah. No, I didn't come till '73.
Yeah. Well, so, but the whole deal with Lamphere, though, I mean, I've read a lot about that. I thought that was really fascinating.
Yeah.
Because he claimed to be the guy that shot down Yamamoto, and apparently after the mission, he punched the radio button and said, that's SOB won't be dictating terms of the lawn of the White House or something like that, which apparently just infuriated was one of the admirals, and so the guys didn't get medals of honor. Instead, they just got some sort of commendation.
Right.
But he always claimed that the way he did it was that I'm sure you've heard. I'll just kind of remind you of the story. Is they flew at low level, 300 knots, 300 miles or so, right down the wave tops. As they got to, I guess near the landing area where he was going to land, they looked up. Just as they coasted in, they looked up, and there they were.
Right.
Because Yamamoto was the on-time admiral.
That's right.
And so there they were, and it was 2 Bettys, and each one of them has 3 zeros with them. He said he turned up, and when he did, the 3 zeros dove at him, and he took a shot at one and hit it, and that it exploded. And then I think he said he turned to the left, and then when he came around like this, you put him right abeam of the Betty.
Right.
Impossible.
Right.
I mean, you know, as soon as the Betty saw him, he firewalled it and dove to the coast.
Yeah.
So I don't see how he could have possibly have done that. But then he said he had a beam shot on it, and he was basically just coming in to clear his guns because he wasn't sure. And when he fired, he saw sparkles on the side of the airplane that had caught fire. That's what he said. And Barber's experience was slightly different.
Yeah, right.
And there was another guy named it's Bisbee, I think is his name. There was a 4th guy who disappeared. I never know what happened to him.
Yeah.
And the 3rd guy was leading the 2nd element, and when he pulled up, he couldn't get his wing tacks off, so he was just shaking the heck out of the airplane until the tanks fell off. And then as he came around, then he said he got a shot at it too.
Yeah.
But you know, air combat, this is who knows what really happened.
I know.
But Barber said he shot from the rear.
Yeah, right.
And all the holes are in the rear.
Yeah, right.
And apparently when they were about to have an investigation, they were going to have a big meeting down in Texas or somewhere to really sort this out. And Lamper died. And he never, so he wasn't there to represent his side of the case. But I guess he wrote articles, and the man who shot down Yamamoto and all that for years.
Yeah, well, there was, and that went on a long time. But, Tom has got to be a pretty heavy drinker.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And, he had I think maybe he divorced his wife too. We were he got fired from GD. He got fired, they fired him. Frank Pace canned him. And I remember being at the party at La Jolla Country Club, his farewell party. And I forget what he did after that, but he just kind of disappeared from the scene. But I always felt sorry for him, because for me, as an individual, he kind of helped me, go from one place to another.
Well, did he ever tell you the story?
No, because I knew the story.
Oh.
I didn't know the details, but I knew about Yamamoto and all the difficulties there. Yes, I knew that from my Air Force days. But I never did try to press him for what he said, and he never did volunteer either.
Well, it wasn't an interesting event.
Yeah, and I personally think that I have a suspicion, knowing Tom at the time I did with him, that he was looking for political hay.
Well, he told people he wanted to be president.
That's right, and so he was looking for things that give him notoriety.
Yeah.
And he had that in Convair. Joe McNarney was the president of Convair at the time, and Tom was his vice president. And McNarney, a general, knew Tom's dad and all that stuff. So obviously he had clout at that point. But then that disappeared when General Dynamics took over.
Yeah.
And Frank Pace didn't want him.
Huh. That was a kind of a sad wind-up to the whole thing.
It was. And of course I kind of felt bad about it too, because from my perspective, I liked Tom.
Yeah.
And I would invite, he came up and helped us out in Palmdale, to talk to our management club, things like that.
Yeah.
And he was always entertaining.
Yeah.
I found the guy.
I don't even know what he looks like. I never really saw a picture of him.
Well, he was a nice-looking fellow, except at the end he was starting to get a little fat.
Yeah.
That's because of the bottle.
But he died early. It's been 20 years.
Oh yeah, he died pretty early.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think a heart problem or something. I kind of think that I think he was pretty disappointed the way things turned out.
Yeah.
And he didn't suicide, no, but I think he was hitting the bottle pretty heavy.
Yeah, that's what happened to Olds too.
Yeah.
Olds died.
Yeah.
After talking to Jerry Coleman, after talking to you, I can see that people that don't smoke and don't drink last a long time.
Yeah, that's right.
But let me see. We're about out of time here. I got about 3 minutes left. So, what was the best airplane you ever flew?
106.
Really? Wow.
Cadillac. And the next best was the P38.
Really? So what's the future for fighter planes?
Small. Because two things. First off, our current management in DOD is not enamored by the Air Force, period. They're more enamored by drones. And even though the Air Force has a lot to do with the drones, but I don't think they see it that way. The previous Secretary of Defense, before Panetta, he really got upset with the Air Force. He fired the Chief of Staff, fired the Secretary, remember that? And he cut the program, the F-22 program down significantly.
Well, I can understand that. To me, you know, they just don't need the kind of performance that you have in an F-22.
Well, I don't argue that.
I mean, the Taliban Air Force is not too strong.
I know that, but that's right. But the point is, sometimes when you get to thinking about fighting with a rifle, you know, and those Russians are still around, and these guys, and there are other people in the world that are not Taliban. We're focused on that right now.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
And you get mousetrapped on that kind of stuff. So I'm not defending the F-22 because I don't know much about it, but I do know that our Defense Department is pretty much. They say now they're going to think about the Pacific, and I know what that means. The Navy carriers are good, but the Navy carriers have got problems coming too. A lot of the F-18 is getting old, and somebody's got to think about replacing those things. Well, they said, okay, the F-35. But I was over at North Island and when on my VF-51 squadron reunion here in March, and the top admiral over there briefed us, and he said, one thing I don't like about he said, I don't like that when they come down vertically, because I get all that blast, side blast, right? That doesn't do the guys on the carrier. So
I never thought about that.
That's right. But think about it, you can be blown over the side, right?
Oh, absolutely, sure. So, anyway, we've been going for 2 hours. What do you think?
Well, I think I better quit. I can much more I can tell.
I went to pilot training in Del Rio, Texas. So
did you? Yeah.
God awful place. So you flew the PT-19 first?
PT-19. And that was the primary trainer. That was made by Fairchild. And it had a fairly wide landing gear, open cockpit, two-seater, low wing. And it was a very, very pleasant airplane to fly. It had an inverted engine with 4 cylinders, air-cooled. And I thought it was a good airplane, and my instructor, in those days we had, primary was civilian instructors. And my instructor was from Chicago. And at that time, I thought I wanted to be a bomber pilot. I thought I wanted to fly B-24s. But with his instruction and what we went through, the program we went through, I seemed to have an adaptation for aerobatics. And he said, no, he said, I think you should be a fighter pilot. So that stuck with me then, so I went on to basic training. You want to move on to basic? Mm-hmm. Basic training was in Sherman, Texas, with a BT-13 made by Vultee, and that had about a 450 horsepower radial engine. And it was a larger plane, and it also had a fairly wide landing gear for landing, but there was the first time we met an Army instructor. We had an Army officer, a second lieutenant was my first flight instructor for the Army Air Corps. And we jokingly called the BT-13 because the Vultee vibrator, and the joke was it was 10,000 rivets flying in close formation.
So after the BT-13,
then I went on to advanced training. See, the PT-19 was primary, the BT-13 was basic, then the advanced training was AT-6, the Texan.
Well, I used that for a really long time.
Yeah. It sure did, in both the Army and the Navy.
Right. Called it something different. But.
Right.
So when you flew, so then after you flew the AT6, now after you, was that when you, did you graduate? Currently the catalog is online, but to actually view some of these tapes, you have to actually come down and see them or listen to them or read the transcriptions. Sooner or later, they're all going to be on YouTube. The object of the interview is to record the significant personal histories of interest in aviation highlights. Hopefully it will take 1.5 to 2 hours. I'll try and ask simple and relevant questions with some follow-up for clarification. We'll start with the mundane info and then move on to more personal stuff and talk about your personal insights and belief. And maybe at the end you can kind of give us your overall view of where we are today in aviation. Once we've completed this, I'll have it transcribed onto our mainframe and we'll make a DVD and I'll mail it to you in the mail. We were doing having these transcribed, but it's extraordinarily expensive to do it.
Yeah.
So with the transcription you go back and correct things, but
yeah.
I don't think it's all that important right now. So to start off, let me just start with your name and date of birth and where were you born?
Okay, my name is Rex Warden. I was born December 15th, 1924 in the state of Iowa.
How about your parents?
My parents were born in Missouri, and it's across the line from where I was born in Iowa. They were born in Grant City, Missouri.
What were their occupations?
And my father was a farmer, and all my ancestors on that side of the family were Midwestern farmers. And my mother, her parents were, her father was a banker. So and other members of her family were teachers.
So what got you interested in aviation?
Well, probably somewhere in the 1930s, and I can't remember the exact year, my dad hired a ride in a biplane. And the two of us sat in the front cockpit of this biplane, the pilot was in the back. It was a typical barnstorming thing in those days where pilots that had those kind of planes came around to country areas and gave rides, and that's how they made a living. So that was my first contact with a flight. Then later on, in my schooling, I became interested in, of course, the Lindbergh thing was part of our schooling in all those days. And I remember having a Lindbergh tablet, of course. And that one thing led to another. And then World War II came along, and I knew that I wanted to get involved in military aviation. And I had seen a movie somewhere in the 30s, the West Point of the Air, with Robert Montgomery and that particular thing, which was interesting. And then interesting note that I then later on, many years later, living in Rancho Santa Fe, in the market, village market one day, I saw Robert Montgomery. I felt like I said, little you know what you caused me to do.
Did you talk to him?
Just briefly, said hello, but I didn't do that. Wallace Berry was the other guy in the movie, and I remember, but it's funny how the little things like that. But then the war, then I knew that I wanted to be involved in Army aviation. So that's why I signed up for the Army Air Corps program as soon as I could. At that time, they wanted pilots to have 2 years of college. And I had graduated from high school in 1942. I went to the University of Wyoming, 42, 43. Then they would take us if we had 1 year, because in the program we signed up for, we went through basic training, then we went to college training to get enough to where they would recognize that your total education requirements were equivalent to 2 years. And then we went on, then you could go on to flight training.
So where was your first pilot training base?
My first pilot training base, well, first I had to go through pre-flight, which was in San Antonio, Texas. And from there I went to, in West Texas, a little town out there where I flew the P39 as a primary trainer.
A little town in Texas called?
I can't remember that popped up right off a minute, but it was a West Texas, small Stamford, Texas, Stamford.
And get your wings.
Right, I got my wings in September, early September 1944. And I had planned to go right on from advanced plan graduation into replacement training at RTU.
Mm-hmm.
But the system had kind of backed up. Apparently they had enough pilots a little ahead of us, so we didn't go right on to plan. So then I was picked in a small group to go back to flight instructor school at Randolph Field, Texas, which was, of course, the old primary principal base of the Army Air Corps. Historically, all the bells and whistles there for that part of it. So I went through that 6 weeks to be qualified to become an instructor. And then I was sent out to Big Spring, Texas to be a flight instructor at Goodfellow Air Force Base.
What was your class? What class were you?
44H.
44H.
September 8th, 1944.
I was in 66G.
Yeah.
So then what did you instruct in then?
The T6,
Okay.
and basic T6.
So, but now somewhere along the line,
Advanced. Yeah, no, it's basic. No, I did instruct. I was taught to an instructor in a T6, and I went to fly as a T6 instructor. Yes.
so when the war ended, where were you?
Then I was in. Well, when I was out in Goodfellow Field, I wasn't there very long. I was there maybe 6 weeks, and they came along with a program one day, and they said, "We need some volunteers to go overseas right away." Well, I was frustrated having been sidetracked into being an instructor, so actually I was the one that held up my hand right away. Well, there were more volunteers than were opening, so we had to draw cards, and I drew the King of Diamonds, and so I was on the list. And so we were told to go to Greensboro, North Carolina immediately, and we did that and go back there, and typical overseas stuff, carbine rifle range, 45 caliber pistol qualification, lots of shots and all that stuff, and then shipped down to Miami, Florida for the APO. And we got down there, and a nice hotel we were put up there, but we didn't get any information where you were going or when you were going. So we hung around till one day they said, "Okay, pack your bag. We're going to leave the hotel tonight." So we did that. Got out to the airport and had our bags packed, but there and here we had to walk on to a C-47, and it was kind of mostly full of cargo, and where the heck are we going with something like this with just a bucket seats for us to sit? And so they told us, well, after takeoff, the captain of the airplane, he will come back and open your orders 30 minutes after takeoff. Then you'll know where you're going. So we got in there, and it's a Goonie bird, C-47.
Right.
And so we grind along up there, and he comes back and he says, "Well, guys," he says, "I'm going to drop you off in Panama." The Panama? Hell, there's no war there, but as we found out later, the defending the Panama Canal was pretty important in those days, because principally for the Navy, because everything had to come through from the eastern seaboard through the canal to get to the Pacific. Supplies, aircraft carriers, and a whole 6 yards. So, and also the Japanese had some threat early on that they could possibly get a submarine in an area and blow up one of the locks and choke off the canal, and that would be a major logistic problem for the United States.
So this would have been about March, April of 45.
Yeah, well, no, it was January of 45
Okay.
when I was in Panama, yeah. I was initially there. So December was when I was going through all this, late December, going through all this training at Greensboro and at the APO in Miami, right? That was always, kind of in those days, kind of condensed, and you went through that with
But now then were you going to fly the AT-6 down there then? Or?
No, P39. So we were going to go to fighter squadrons there. And as I say, I had been